Good evening. It's Sunday, February 2nd. And we're going to go actually over one of my bins that I need to harvest. This bin should have been harvested on 10/24, but I'm not doing it until now. So we're going to do a refresh of this bin. This bin was going for 3 months. Real good product. This is some good vermicompost. And we're going to go through it, sift it out, put new bedding in it, and start it over. Let it go for another 3 months. I mean, this is some very good worm castings. Not wet. I mean, this stuff is good. Nice black worm compost. These bins, what I did is once I got to the last where I knew it was going to be a couple of weeks before I harvest the castings out of this bin, I stopped feeding it and any solid food and start basically just giving it worm food, homemade worm food, and rabbit compost or goat compost, whatever I have, and then this is what I do at the end. So it looks good, good moisture, a lot of worms in there. Not sure about this bin if I actually did put in biochar at the bottom. I'm not sure, but I'm also going to check the temperature of this bin. $60 degrees on this bin. Good temperature, keeps them moving around, keeps them wiggling. So that's what we want. We want our bins to just keep wiggling and keep them active so that they eat. And the more they eat, the more they poop. The more they make those castings, what we're after. So this bin is in real good shape. Good moisture. There is biochar in this, but this was biochar that was mixed in. This wasn't biochar, I don't believe, from the bottom. What I did is I did test one of my bins where I put biochar at the bottom of the bin when I started it. A nice layer. You'll see that in another one of my videos that I did recently. And did make it a little harder to get the last of the castings and worms out of it from the bottom, but I actually got 22 ounces of worms out of that, so that's over 1,000 worms in there. So that was good. That was good. And like I said before, when I set up my bins, I use newspaper, I use white paper, I use cardboard, and then I put some other minerals in it just to make the bin a little more healthier. So that works out good. And I put the biochar in there. I will be using just probably the powder biochar instead of the flakes. And that way to clean them out. So it's a real good healthy bin. Nice fat happy worms. A lot of worms in here. My last bin that I did had tons of baby worms. I didn't start a new bin with it. I just actually put them right back in to the bin. just to keep populating that particular bin. So it worked out good. So I know you might have seen this before. How I sift it, but I'm going to sift a little bit of it, and then I'm just going to go through it and kind of go from there. So I'm going to back the camera up a little bit so I can show you how I sift, what I sift, how the worms look, and go from there. Actually, I think that shot's pretty good. I don't think I'll have to do so. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some worm castings out. Put the bin a little closer so I don't spill it. This is my homemade scraper. Just to pick up a couple of scoops of worm castings. So, it's a couple. I have a bucket on the bottom. I have a, I believe this is actually a 1/8 inch screen. Sift them out, and that's what you get. First pile. Yeah, this one does have a lot of biochar in it. This might have been one that I put a lot of the flakes in, but that product looks good. I don't know if you can see it, but that's what you want when you get done. I'm gonna sift this out. Yeah, I know you hear that. That's the biochar. But this is what we're getting. I mean, the moisture on that, it's perfect. Perfect. Good moisture. Perfect. So, that's good. I like that. I'm happy with the results of that. Do a couple of more scoops. Worms have actually crawled down quite a bit, so there are some worms in here. Well, like I said, there are some worms that get through. The worms love the side. They seem to congregate right in the corners. Just fine. You know, they like to hang out on the corner sometimes too. So, but nice, good. So, but I'm gonna sift these out. I mean, as you can see, we're not getting clumps of dirt or castings left behind. It's the biochar and the worms. That's all we're getting left behind. So that's nice castings. I'm gonna grab a bucket that I had some castings in already. So that's a full bucket. This is the half a bucket of castings. Now you can see this particular one's got quite a bit of worms in it. Coming up to the top. I'm going to try to scoop some of them out. So I guess I didn't do the best job of getting out all the worms last time. But that's alright. They'll inhabit this particular bin. So just talking about the health of your bin. Everybody does their bins different. And has success with it on how they do it. And you know, you have to measure your success with your bins based on how you do it. The results are always going to be different no matter how one person does it, how I do my bins, how you do your bins, how you harvest your bins, what you do in it, what you put in it. All that's going to be a little different from how I do it, how you do it. So it's always going to be a little bit different. And I believe, based on what I do, I have a lot of good success with my bins as far as keeping them populated, the growth of the bin, as far as the amount of worms. I was keeping a chart at one point. Every time I change a bin, harvest a bin, I would put down the amount of worms. The amount of worms I would harvest out of that bin. So I know if that bin was growing or standing still, the population, you know, went bigger, went smaller. That's what we all kind of do. Try to see where we're at, see if we're growing, and if we're not growing, why aren't we growing? What's our population isn't growing? Why isn't it growing? What's going on? We should have a good harvest each time. As far as castings, my harvest is very good, always. So far, so good. They've been good. I haven't had any problems with the castings. The amount of worms that I'm pulling out, I'm using the red wigglers just like everybody else is using red wigglers. Some people are doing night crawlers. I'm doing red wigglers. They're always nice size red wigglers. So I'm happy with it. Probably I will change up a little bit. We all measure our success with what we're doing based on where we started. I mean, where we started and where we're at today. I mean, the bottom of this bin is just loaded with the red wigglers. I mean, this is where they were congregating. And like I said, once again, it's a good healthy bin. You know, and I say that a lot of the health comes from what I put in when I start my bin. Like I said, I use the newspaper, I use regular paper and cardboard. That gives them their fiber, gives them that carbon footprint to eat on, to sustain them when there's not much food in there. And then the cardboard and the paper also breaks down on its own in the bin. There's some nice worms in there. There's and then I also think that the minerals that I add to my bins help it also. And whatever minerals you do put in yours or don't put in. It's definitely going to show in your results. This one's a little, we're getting down to the bottom. We're getting down to the bottom of the bin. It's getting a little more, it's a little moist. A little more moisture. I mean, that's the bottom of the bin. Still very flaky, very loose. That's what you want when you start looking into your bin. You don't want to see mud pies. You don't want to see too much moisture. You want to have enough moisture in there that the microbes and the biology is going to still be alive in your castings. If it's too wet, it's not good. You know, you don't want too much moisture in there. I mean, that's good moisture to me. It's nice. Like I said, that is the bottom, so it does have a little more moisture than what I was pulling out. but that is to be expected. So, that last pile I didn't put in my regular pile. I put in a different pile. It's a little more moisture. This is one of the bins that I did do the biochar on the bottom. Put a layer of biochar on the bottom. So that one did. It is a little wetter. I mean, I'm getting down to the bottom. This is pretty much a 1/4 inch. And definitely, that's where all the worms are. They're hanging down at the bottom. They like that moisture. It's a little more moist, but we all know they like it moist. I mean, that's where they're all at. There's a chunk of them on the other table, but there's a lot here. That's where all my babies are. So, a lot of them in there. Give me 1 second. Wanted to go get something to put clumps of the worms. I mean, those bad boys are just there. I mean, they're all over that. They're just all in there. I mean, there were so many worms in there. They're still stuck in there, but that's okay. They're gonna come out. So, I mean, that's some of them. So, I mean, you want your bin to multiply, and they will regulate the population also, but it also depends on the size that you have for a bin. If you're overpopulated, I mean, just look. Those are all worms. I mean, those are worms. There's plenty of worms in there, and my product isn't over moist at the bottom, even where they are. And that's what you want. You want your bin to have enough moisture. I mean, that's just worms. I mean, those are just worms. There's tons of worms. I mean, I'm happy with my bins. My bins, I'm very happy with it. I've been doing this now for probably this is going to be my 3rd year I'm doing this. I mean, those are real healthy worms. And I don't mean to not trying to sound disrespectful or anything like that, but all this activity is all common sense. You know, if you think about how a worm lives, what it lives in soil. Does it like super moist soil? No. When you're outside and they're draining, they're trying to get away. You're trying to go to an area that's not as moist. It's not saturated. So that's what you want to do with your bin. You don't want your bin to be saturated with liquid. You want your bin to be a happy bin, that's worms. That's worms. I'm happy with that. That's good amount of worms. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of this, there's probably 2 pounds of worms in my bin that has basically multiplied. I mean, that's all worms. There's all worms in here. You know, I just try to think about it when I look at my bins. It's not a science to me, but I mean, it's like I just try to use a little common sense and say, if that was me in that, would I want to be wet? And I'm the type of guy, I don't like to be wet. You know, summertime, I work out in the elements. When I go to work in the summertime, I bring an extra 2 shirts. So when I'm sweating and I'm extremely wet, I like to get out of that. So I kind of look at the worms as the same thing. Do they want to be in that over moisture, muddy type soil? No. I know they don't want to be in that. So that's how I look at it. And I try to mimic that in what I do for the worms. So that's worms that's in the biochar. That's all biochar. That's full of worms. I almost kind of say that the worms enjoy living in that biochar because they were at the bottom. I'm almost right now rethinking my thought of whether I should put a layer of biochar on the bottom, because they seem to do extremely well in that biochar. Both of those have a lot of worms stuck to the grate. I'm just gonna pick some of these bigger worms. Last time I was a little lazy. I didn't pick out some of the worms that got through. Now at the same time of my bin right now, now would I say this is wet? Yes, I would say that's wet. A little more moisture in it than I